Now, welcome everyone. So today we're working with Kaja's couple. Is it the same couple we looked at before or a different one?
That's right. It's the same couple we discussed last time.
Wonderful. So I think we've worked with them twice already. And if I recall, it was a female pursuer, male withdrawer, with the female pursuer interrupting a lot and making it really hard. I think you called it mayhem or chaos or something last session.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly. Yeah. So maybe we can start with what you tried to do since last time, since like everything's recorded from our first two supervisions that people can go back and watch. But yeah, maybe what you tried to implement and how that's been going. I know it's only been maybe a couple of weeks since our last supervision around this couple.
Yeah,
And then we can go from there.
Sounds great, Ofir. Thank you. Yeah, so first off, I want to start with thanking you for sharing with me this podcast that you sent to me recently. I listened to it and it really helped me understand better the pursuers, actually. It was really, really cool because everything that they discussed during this podcast described many behaviors that my pursuer, let's call it, shows displays in the session. And it was very interesting to listen to it. In general, it was really really good. So
and for those that don't know, it's called the Leading Edge Podcast. All they do is talk about EFT, so it gets really into the weeds. They're able to have very specialized episodes on very, very specific challenges within working with couples. Some of it does involve, even if you're not an EFT practitioner, a lot of great tools, but they work just primarily from the EFT model. And so what I'll say about that too is it's so crucial and so important for us to be able to align with our clients and understand the worldview that they're coming from. Until we can do that, they're not going to feel heard. And if they don't feel heard, they aren't able to drop down into those primary emotions. And that's where we often will see these secondary behaviors come up, right? Whether we're working with them, if we don't hear them, we're not capturing their experience correctly, or we're working with their partner and then their partner says something that then triggers them because they don't feel like their partner is capturing their experience accurately. And so it's very important. I don't know if it was that episode or another one, but one of the really good tools that we like, that's very tangible, that we can apply to anyone that is escalating in session, is what they call the two-step, which is essentially validating and then going right back to what it is we're working on, the goal, the mission, so to speak, that they call it. Yeah.
I really like that. And I actually, it came together with what you were talking about around the focus and how focus is absolutely crucial, especially when it comes to enactment, but in general, like in a successful session, so to speak. And that is very difficult to get to that point where you actually stay focused, even as a counselor when working with couples. So that, like, and on top of that, so for everybody, so for those that are not familiar with the last supervision we did around this couple, I was showing pieces of recording where the female partner had what I referred to as a meltdown. It was an emotional meltdown. And I allowed her to go really far with that. And I didn't really know how to manage it. I wasn't sure if that's, the right thing to do or not. Now looking back, obviously, I should have paused. And what Ofir told me that I found really helpful is that this is her, she's very comfortable with this type of expression. This is her go-to. And we don't want them to go that way. So I kept that in mind for the next session. Right. That really stuck with me. So it was really great.
And the reason we don't want them to go into that is it's already what their cycle is. It's just, not only is it just reinforcing what they're already doing, but they're coming to us because they're wanting their cycle to look different. So what they're doing is not working. If it was working, they wouldn't be coming to us, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to shift from that. It's good to know what it currently is at, whether you're working with a couple or individuals. Like, you need to know where they're at.
Yeah.
And then you need to, in some ways, have a map, which EFT is, which tells you where to go from where they're currently at. And it's kind of like that, the name of the podcast too, because it's the leading edge. So that's what we're always after. We're always after knowing where they're currently at, where their cycle is at. So we're always in that step one of EFT in the beginning of a session, just to be able to know where are we at. And then in order to know where we're going and to confirm where we're at, and then to gauge what the level of risk is for that particular person, to know what their leading edge is, to know what's within their comfort zone, so that we know what is reasonable to request of them without going too far.
Yeah, I know. I found that really, really helpful. And since that last session, or the session that we discussed, where the so-called meltdown took place, I really tried to give more space to the withdrawer. And I've been working on that, but it's never been very, very effective. So this last session, actually, somehow miraculously, it happened. It's like I just started with a check-in. I changed the check-in again with your advice. I connected it to the previous session. So rather checking where they are at, I asked about their reflections from the last session, and that went way better. Really, there was definitely more for them to say. I saw that they were way more engaged in this check-in as well, emotionally at least. And the pursuer started, and the withdrawer followed with the check-in, and I stuck to him. So it kind of, the transition was very smooth. It didn't feel like I was just like leaving the pursuer behind, which she can be very sensitive to as well. I didn't plan that, really. It kind of came out this way, so I don't know. I probably just got lucky. But
Well, hold on. You said miraculous and you said lucky, right? So
yeah.
whereas you're also describing what you're doing, right? So it does seem like there's a lot of conscious effort into doing things differently, because you had seen them, I believe, at least 15 sessions, and
Yeah.
you were kind of in a standstill, right? Like you were getting into like a plateau, and then they were getting frustrated with it, and you had that mayhap session. But
Yeah.
you got supervision, you took some things away from it, you're applying things in a very conscious way. Maybe you're not applying everything, but you're applying certain things, and it's going better. So I wouldn't call that miraculous. I think you can give yourself a little bit more credit than that.
Well, definitely there was more awareness about like the previous challenges that I had, and how I could amend them with the help of that last supervision. So yeah, that for sure. Thanks. I have a, so what I wanted to show you today is, and we'll see how much we'll have time to actually listen to, but it's like a 4-minute at least of like a momentum, I would say, where I transitioned from actually a long discussion with the withdrawer about the emotions. The client, first the pursuer, described the situation that again demonstrated their cycle. They would be, the withdrawer, the male partner will be downstairs working on a leak. The female partner would come down frustrated, feeling that she's getting no help, that she's alone with a lot of responsibilities. And she comes and says, I'm frustrated, this is not working, like you gotta help, or we have to do these things, da 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 da. And he obviously is doing stonewalling, shuts down, gets overwhelmed, withdraws. She reads it as he doesn't care, or he doesn't allow her to speak, because that's her big thing. She feels like she's invisible, she's not allowed to exist, she's not allowed to express herself. So that's her big thing.
On that note, because I want to know the kind of feedback you're going to want from the
Mm-hmm.
recording, but just to stop you right there,
Yeah.
when to think about when you conceptualize, when you're describing a client, and because it informs how you see them, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that in the past, and now even as you're describing it, that's a bit vague, that I want you to get really clear on, is what is the trigger?
Mm-hmm.
You're describing the trigger as her perception.
Yeah.
I want you to get really clear when you're describing it. You may know it already, but when you're describing it, especially, is what is he doing or not doing, very, very practically speaking, in the moment, that leads to her perception.
He's not
But that's,
validating her. Yeah.
well, that's a lack of action is not a trigger. So you know, there's an actual, in a positive sense, thing that he's doing, right, or not doing, right? Meaning she's maybe in a particular moment looking for something and he's not doing it, right? And then that's that has more context, but then so the context, the content is helpful to know what the trigger is.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, it's she asked for something or did something and then was waiting for something and then it didn't happen, right? Or he's looking down or looking away, or something that he's actually doing that ends up being the trigger. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to fine tune that's going to help um, connect to her perception. And it helps when you're working through and trying to open up the cycle, because he gets to know what is it that is the catalyst, so to speak. Not, again, it's never the cause, it's just the catalyst that leads to, there's all these different catalysts that he does or doesn't do, right, in different moments,
Yeah.
that then create a pattern that we're able to extrapolate from, right? They all lead to these perceptions, but as we're working through stage one, when you're getting the story, when you're getting the story of the week, what happened, like in this case, you want to get very, very fine-tuned with what the trigger is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're catching them in the session, it's even easier to catch, because now you get to see it in real time, right? He looked away, he said something, you know, she said something, he didn't respond, and then she got, like, you know, activated by that. But then you can slow down and then uncover what the perceptions are from that, what the meaning that she's taking from that, which of course leads to previous moments in the relationship, previous moments in previous relationships, all the way potentially down to childhood, depending on her experience.
That's really good. Yeah. And I can definitely dive into like details, like really nitty gritty of what's happening, because
Yeah.
what's out now is that she's very sensitive. She's in general like very empathetic. She can read emotions, she can sense them, you know. So she navigates that pretty well, but it's also her biggest enemy. And to her, his body language is something that seems to trigger her the most, because if he shuts down, obviously he uses no words, but then, as you said, potentially he will look back, or he will just look down and then go downstairs and just ignore, or she thinks he's ignoring it, whereas he's just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
we're making things a lot more concrete that way. And when behavior is concrete and it's also not invalidated, right? When we're working with one person's stated intention, we're kind of working in a cognitive level, and it's abstract and it's possible to project onto, which means it can come across as invalidating or you taking sides. If you're just talking about behavior, behavior doesn't in and of itself guarantee a particular meaning. Different people will take, based on those sensitivities, will take different meanings, right? And of course, the most important thing is the attachment related messages that we're getting, because if it was a stranger doing the same thing, it wouldn't land for her in the same way, at least not to the same degree. It's him, because she's looking to him for certain things, and him doing those things, it lands as an attachment message, right? So that's why it's so important to be as neutral and behavior in the way that a video camera or your in real-time observations are able to pick up. that's going to be the most neutral, the least likely to trigger either side. And it allows you to not have to sort of deal with all the secondary things that come up when you're able to make a really, really neutral language. But behavior is the most neutral because it's like fact-based, right? If you were recording them with a video camera, it's exactly what the camera would see. You're just describing it. Even taking out like you yelled loudly or even you yelled has a connotation. But when your voice did that, right? When it went from this to that, right? Is very like we were both here for that, right? And
Yeah.
so it makes the process a little bit smoother, I would say.
That's very helpful. Yeah, because I've been like very careful around that, especially around pursuer, because pursuer is very sensitive to being described in any way by withdrawer, and the withdrawer is terrified to describe the pursuer in the session.
Exactly.
So maybe some sort of like guidance also from my side can help kind of navigate that discussion. Just focus on things that are rather like facts.
Yeah, that allows to model it. You're modeling for both of them as well, how your language is not triggering, and so that can also land over time.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So in the fragment that I want to play to you, I guess the feedback I'll be looking for is really on what I'm saying. This is actually a part where I get into talking, which I don't really like. I listened to it a few times now. And I see how much I try to like force psychoeducation in everything I said. And I really honestly, I will be just very curious to hear your feedback on that, because I really don't know whether this was even helpful to the client. Well, the client responded, so he followed up after what I said. But I wasn't sure if that was really the best way to transition, or the smoothest way to transition to get him to actually reflect more on that given situation downstairs. Just a little bit of background, I maybe mentioned this briefly, but this fragment comes after at least like I think 20 minutes of talking about what was going on for the withdrawer during that situation. So we got to the point where the fear was discussed a lot, which he doesn't get to much. He's often, he goes to, I am a disappointment, I can never do things right, I can never, make her happy, but like he's very self-blaming when he does that. So this time we got to the point where the fear of losing her because he doesn't know how to attend to her needs comes to surface, and it's very overwhelming, as well as just like the expectations where he's actually he believes that he's doing something for both of them, but then she comes in and then he again is disappointed with himself because again it's proven that he is not doing the right thing and he can lose her. So that's where we kind of got to, and the transition.
So let me see if I understand that correctly. So you did 20 minutes of that, and now you want to show a 4-minute clip of where in response to those 20 minutes, you did some psychoed, and you want to know how that psychoed landed, or if you could have done something different with that.
And it's kind of like leading towards the enactment, which again, I told you already was not perfect, but we said it wouldn't be perfect. So I'm kind of like, I'm in peace with that.
So is that accurate though? You're wanting to know, like, was this helpful, the psychoed piece? Could I have done without it?
Yes.
Something like that? Yeah.
Exactly. And what followed after that with the withdrawers response, which was kind of like half enactment, whether that even kind of connected, whether I connected well with that. So kind of that little.
Yeah. So right before you share, I mean, just based off what you're saying, if you're spending 20 minutes and you got to some kind of fear, some kind of this experience of I'm trying really hard, and no matter what I do, I'm letting her down, or her response tells me I'm not doing it right, right? That's like the essence of the experience, which is a very typical withdrawer experience. They work really hard to try to listen. They try to do exactly in the way that it was told, and then they're told it's not enough or not the right thing. And so they feel like, well, no matter how hard I work, it's not working, so might as well give up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a really good experience to be able to enact. It sounds like maybe that's where, so I'm curious about what makes you want to share this 4-minute piece of the psychoed as opposed to that at the end, where we can go right from that to the enactment while the emotion, the primary experience is in the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it seems already like you answered your own question, but let's see, let's hear it
Yeah, because
and see.
I feel like in that part, I kind of disconnect from the depth of the conversation because I want to do a bit of psychoed and then still lead
So
him
where's
towards
that? Where is that urge or that instinct to go into psychoed? Like the
yeah.
way I envision it is like he's already underwater in the sense of the primary experience. He's already on a down the elevator of emotions, and you're taking him from there where you already want him to be, and he's saying, let me enact, let me share it with my partner in a way. And you're going, no, 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 let me bring you up here to your head. Let me like move you away from your primary experience where I already want you to be, and let me get you to think about things first. And then somehow you'll remember that you were down here earlier where I now want you to be to do the enactment. So it makes sense why it was just kind of a half enactment, but
Uh,
let's see. Yeah.
yeah, just on that, because as you asked this, it came to me. I might have done that for the pursuer, actually. That's what I think. That I think she's like throughout, even when I'm with the withdrawer, I'm thinking of the pursuer and I need to clarify things extra. And that's actually, I think you will hear that as well. I'm trying to kind of justify things for the pursuer, which
So
is my biggest struggle.
how did the pursuer come across during those 20 minutes when you were working with him? What was your sense of what was
Uh,
going on for her during that time?
mixed. She was partly supportive in the moments when the pursuer, when the withdrawer would weep a little bit. She would put her hand on his lap, so there was some affection shown, some support, physical support, and therefore emotional as well.
You said when he would weep. So that
Mhm.
tells me when he would emotionally be showing up, right? When he's
Yes.
coming, those primary emotions are coming to the surface, she would respond well.
Yeah, but then in between those, when the withdrawer would be describing different situations where again he would be mostly self-blaming, she would be shaking her head. And I already know what that body language means. That means that she disagrees with what he's saying, that she doesn't think that like that she knows the truth is different. And then she always goes back to that. She always gets attached to those moments. And when it's her turn, she will jump on those moments. I have to bring
Hmm.
her back to the latest experience with the withdrawer. So she really gets attached to those moments where she believes that this is not right, this is not straight. And it's not even about, and we talk a lot about my story, your story, different perspectives, but she's like, this is not a matter of perspective, this is facts.
Yeah.
So we have
And
that. Yeah.
the weeping part, was that after the storytelling, the it's my fault, or was that before, or kind of interspersed throughout?
It would at the beginning would be mostly like describing what was going on and being more on the surface, and then as we would get deeper, the client would get more emotional. I mean, the male partner would get more emotional. But there would be moments where he would add something to it that maybe was related to the situation that would go together with the primary emotions, and that would still be like noticed, registered by the
Got it.
pursuer. So
Got
yeah.
it. Yeah, so the storytelling would be triggering potentially, whereas the experiencing would bring her to almost like a primary state herself, her like empathic, compassionate, right?
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what you would expect, right? And the purpose of the enactment is actually to really focus the primary piece of all of that, right? So even though when you're working with him, there's certain things that may trigger her versus certain things that may kind of pull her in the way that we would want, at the point at which you send it off to him to enact to her, you're only asking him to enact those primary pieces, right? Once he's fully connected with it, right? So
Yeah.
on the way down to him fully being able to experience, label, inhabit, right, in a congruent way, when you really feel it, that's where, we call it like it's hot, like it's like a hot potato. It's ready to be passed over because
Mm-hmm.
it's like felt in the room.
Yeah.
And the only real thing you would keep in mind is she receptive in this moment, or to what degree is she receptive? Meaning, if he's able to express it in the way that he's relaying it to me in this moment, and then you can look to her and see, is it likely that she's going to receive it well if he's able to express it in the same way while he's feeling that, right? And if he is, most likely she'll respond and receive it well. And it sounds like at certain moments he's connected to it, and then maybe sprinkling in some pieces that may be triggering, right? Which is okay. But then when you get him to hand it over to do the enactment, you're going, what you feel right now, whatever it is you're experiencing, right? The whatever it is, let's say it's like being overwhelmed or whatever it is, can you turn to her and can you share that in the same way that you shared with me, right? Or exactly how you feel it right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's all he's sharing, right? He's not sharing all that other stuff, the potentially triggering pieces, right? And you can see she, it sounds like, is able to stay with or connect with, maybe a better term is connect with when he's primary versus when he's not, right? So it's not like she has to come back to those other pieces that are triggering, right? Because the more he can connect to the primary and share it with her, that's all she'll be experiencing in that moment, because that's all you're asking her about, right? Like, humans are very complex. Depending on what we get us to attend to, that will elicit the particular response that we're either wanting or not wanting, right? There's so much information, right? But if I get him to express just the primary weeping aspect of what you were really able to connect with, and she was as well, and ask her, what's it like when he looks at you and shares that one piece, just that, not everything from before, because I know there were some pieces there that might have been triggering, but just right there when he looked at you in the eyes
Mm-hmm.
and shared that piece, what came up for you, right?
So that's a good
So
way.
that's you're focusing the response you're looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not, the purpose of it is to go, here's this new cycle, here's this new experience that you guys don't get to really share with each other in this way. Look at what happens when you do that. Look at what happens when you ride the bike in this way. Because the enactment is the only thing that is the experience. Everything up until there, it's it's more mental, it's more cognitive. It's not, like, the work hasn't really begun
Yeah.
until you get them to look at each other and share something. Up until then, it's done so in a safe way because you've got your container that you're able to protect them around. Until they share with each other, there's nothing to really extrapolate into the real world, into the world outside of the sessions. But it's like, and others will use this analogy. So everything up until the enactment is learning about how a bike works. The enactment is now you're riding the bike. You might not ride well. You might be jerky. You might only be, riding it very, very slowly, but you're actually riding it. That's where they're able to pull something away from it, right? And if you don't ride the bike, it's just all in your head because you never got to share it with your partner, right? Your partner was in the room, you were like, you were sitting beside the bike, you were holding the bike, but you weren't on the bike. And that's where the real exposure therapy, so to speak, from the EFT comes in. And up until then, it's nothing can really change because they haven't done anything yet that's real, that's tangible in a sense.
Mm. Yeah. That's good stuff there. I took some notes.
Yeah, so I just have one quick question. Can you clarify if these are in person or remote?
They are remote. So they are all happening through Zoom. The client live outside in a different town. So I never had a chance to meet
But
them.
they're in the same room together, yes?
Yes, always. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I think, Ofir, you might need to let me do a screen sharing, or I can just play it like that. I think it's pretty clear.
I've given you permission, so you're able to now.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I kind of already know what to think about it. So it's just gonna be. All right, here it goes. What's going on for you right now when you think about it? When all these emotions surface a little bit more now too?
Just anxiety and the fear that there's nothing I can do to change what happens in my head, and that it's just going to lead to an outcome that's not great for all of us.
Let's pause it there. There's so much already there. So he said anxiety.
Yes, I want to just add a brief thing that I missed for everybody here. The client's been recently diagnosed, the female partner has been recently diagnosed with ADD. And when he says, I'm afraid that there's nothing that can be fixed in my head, like I can't fix how my brain works and how I split my attention. That's what he's referring to.
Okay. And what I would, just on that note, what better way to disprove that than to have him be able to do the exact thing that he needs to do and get a good result? That would counter the belief that there's nothing he can do, right? But so it was rich just from the few seconds. There's anxiety and fear and a vague thing that he's afraid of. The vague thing being, it's not going to go well. It's just, I'm going to fail. It's vague, right? In the sense of when you ask someone about a fear, right? What would depict failing? What would depict it not going well? So here's where you can blow up the fear, right? You can go, oh, so I want you to connect to the fear you're experiencing right now. Can you just sit with that? Right?
Yeah.
Now tell me, what is the fear saying? What is it that you're afraid of? And I don't know what you've done up until now, but what is it that you're afraid of doing that will tell you that you failed, that will tell you it didn't go well? And to add the attachment piece, what are you afraid that she's going to do? That's the key, because we're not talking about someone else. How will she respond? What are you afraid that she will do if you were to take a risk, if you were to turn to her, if you were to share anything with her? What would tell you that you did and you already know, like it's already all the things that she's been doing. The difference is you're asking him to really connect to the fear and then contemplate sharing something very, very direct with her, which is, I'm afraid to share my experience with you because I'm afraid that you will do X, Y, or Z, right? And if you wanted to deepen that even further, you can go, if you were to share that and you would receive the thing that you're afraid of from her, what would that be like? And that can easily be validated, because what it would be like is probably a whole lot of pain, right? A whole lot of what he's experienced already, but then, multiplied even more so. And then you can validate that because you can go, well, of course you don't share. You're expecting this thing to happen and expecting all this pain to come along with it. Of course you don't share. Of course you will just shut down, walk away. put that, in a box, or cope by closing up, because it's safer. Of course you would do that, right? Anything you've stated you tried, you're afraid of this happening. Now, whether that's because what she's done in the past, or you can explore in other sessions based on his history, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's why you shut down. You're afraid. So this is safer. It's much easier to get that feared response if you're shut down than if you open yourself up and then get that response. So there's a lot of different depths that you can take it, but even at the lowest depth of just, I'm afraid to do X, to do this because I'm afraid you will get mad at me, for example, right? That can be turned into an enactment, right? Can you feel that fear right now? Yeah. Where is it in your body? It's, in my chest, it's in my throat. How intense is it right now? Okay, it's level 8 or whatever. Wow, that's really high, right? Now, what would it be like just to let her know how scary this is for you, right? And that, let's say, is really high. Okay, you can feel it though right now. So you can go to her with that. If it's still an 8, you can say, what's that like to see? He's so afraid to share anything, even to share his fear with you, right? What's that like to hear? Can you see that in his face, that he's actually this afraid, that this is really real for him? When you see that this fear is real for him, what's that like for you, pursuer? Right? He needs to see, before that fear comes down of whatever thing you're asking him to do, he needs to see that she'll respond well. Like, he needs to feel that reassurance for that fear to come down, that thing that he's afraid that she will do will not come true.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that can bring the fear down. Otherwise, it's not going to be shared vulnerably. It's going to be shared in some indirect way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a combination of gauging and getting support from the other side to kind of know what the risk is to take. Where's the window of tolerance? Where is the support that I can use from the other side, right? Where is that? Even if you can only do it at a cognitive level, it's for example, what I mean by that is, to know that he's afraid, what's that like? And she says, oh, I don't want him to be afraid. That's terrible. Okay, right? Can you let him know that you don't want him to be afraid, right? And even more cognitive than that can be turned into an enactment by saying, what would you prefer, pursuer? Do you prefer him to shut down and you get all these messages of, I'm not lovable, he doesn't care? Or would you prefer him to let you know about his fear, that he's afraid of this response from you? Well, duh, I'd rather have him share his fear, right? Good, at least on a cognitive level, in response to him allowing some fear to be kind of seeping through in his body language, and you even enacting it for him, even though it's like, that's still closer to riding the bike, because you're passing it to her, and then letting her do an enactment back about what that would be like, right? Yeah, I prefer that. Can you let him know, right? So you're moving again, like little baby steps towards, true enactments, true in the sense that they're able to do it on their own.
Yeah, this is really helpful. Yeah, thank you. I like when you actually like say exactly how you would say it because that just like
Yeah.
fits so nicely in this like script.
Yeah.
Yeah, the language is very
Yeah. Well,
like,
the biggest thing is to listen for it. He's already using the words, and you just want to deepen it a little bit. He's already using the language that you already are able to attune to, and just open up a little bit and make sure that he's inhabiting that language, that it's not just words, whether you can see it in him or whether you just want him to sit in that a little bit, because that's already scary, to sit in that emotion, right?
yeah.
And sometimes, that can be triggering for the other partner. And so that's where you can be specific in what your ask is of them. Like, I know this is hard for you to sit with, pursuer. Like, can you just give me 3 minutes to work with him? And then I promise you, by the end of the 3 minutes, we'll get somewhere that we'll be able to share back with you, right? And then that gives them that, like, okay, it's not 20 minutes, it's 3 minutes. I can do that, right? Maybe it's 5 minutes, but you're asking them that, right?
Yeah.
and then it allows them to kind of just stay with it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's more of your utilizing your attachment to them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That you've built up until then by doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it gives you 3 minutes to work with him.
Yeah. Fine. Okay. Yeah. No, this is really good.
Yeah, let's keep
Um,
going.
Here, yeah. Here will be where I'm attending somewhere else.
Psycho ed.
Yeah. A lot of anxiety going on, and helplessness.
Yeah, and with that helplessness and anxiety comes silence, right? A lot of unspoken words, because in that given moment that seemed like the best way to handle it. And when the emotions were taking over, right, you just decided to disengage in any possible way because there was just too much going on in your head. You didn't know how to respond in that given moment.
Let's pause there. That's good. That's good psycho ed. You just need one of them. You don't need 3 of them, or however many you end up doing.
Yeah.
But it's essentially capturing his attachment message, which is, look, your intentions to do good. Your intention is to make her happy, right? And when you try really hard and it doesn't work, you end up feeling helpless, right? So then you end up shutting down. It's like the only thing you know how to do because you try, it doesn't work, right? Like, but that's remember the purpose. The purpose of reflection, of like stage 1 of the tango, so to speak, is just to capture the experience for the purpose of dropping them down.
Mm.
That's the purpose. So if you know the purpose, right, when she's escalated, you try to capture her experience so that she can drop down.
Yeah.
It's a validation piece. It's a hearing them piece. It's a, oh, let me see how this fits into your cycle piece so that I'm getting your attachment message here, right? I'm getting how what the other person's doing, how that's triggering for you, right? And then that allows them to drop down, like, yeah, you hear me, right? And if they're still escalated, then you go back to the purpose and you validate some more, or maybe you didn't capture it correctly last time, or it needs to be more fine-tuned, right? But don't lose track of the purpose, right? So it's not really psycho ed. You're really just reflecting, which is
I
good.
probably continue there for a while, like rambling.
I understand that. But he's already there. He's already in his emotions. I can hear it. And you're just wanting him to help. You want to help him inhabit it a little bit more, right? I hear the words. I don't hear the slowing down of it yet. And so he's already on board. So there's no purpose for psycho ed, right? There's purpose for psycho ed maybe at the end when he's already taken a big risk and you zoom out and do a little summary of what just happened and how that plugs into the cycle and how you highlight their strength of being able to move from what they were at the beginning of the session to the end and whatever risks they took, and to highlight how that's different, right? And what you noticed around that as well, like maybe it was hard for her to stay quiet for a little bit, but like how you saw her face light up, once he took a risk, whatever you noticed, those are all really great psycho ed pieces at the end, but they all come from what you observed from the experience, right? They don't come from a cognitive place of trying to fit a particular model or concept onto them. It's more what you know about the model and know about like healthy interactions that you can put onto what they've already done to give words to what happened, right? To help maybe even sometimes move the narrative from like, you saw him this way at first, like you saw he didn't care about you, and then you took this big risk, and then he responded so well, and you took that in the end to mean that he does care about you. And so now you are able to contextualize his old behavior as, oh, he was just shut down because he's overwhelmed, not that he doesn't care. So these kinds of things, this is what we call step 4 an EFT is to reframe, right? That's good psychoed because it helps to give like an interpretation that shifts the narrative, right, from what it was, and that, you know, again, if you feel it's accurate, right? Yeah, but yeah, before doing experience psychoed, in the traditional sense of psychoed, I wouldn't spend more than like 5 seconds at a time on doing something like that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remember for me, because I also kind of like get in the moment and I feel like I have to fill out the space, and I gotta work on that, because with the withdrawer, I try to leave him more space, silence, and like slow down. But sometimes I feel like I have to fill up this space, so it's also on me. Yeah.
Right. Well, if remember to, you know, with the analogy of the bike, psychoed is giving them all the mechanics of how a bike works, right? Until they get to ride the bike, there's nothing to connect it to the mechanics piece, the theory piece. But once they're starting to ride the bike, then you can introduce some of that, and then it can be helpful. And then they'll have questions as well that you can fill in sometimes with psychoed, but not beforehand, because they don't even have they haven't even ridden the bike yet. What did they know about the theory? It doesn't really land compared to any real experience they had. But also the way to think about it too is change happens, whether it's EFT or any modality, including individual therapy, through corrective experiences, right? Through doing something that's hard that then gives you a good result, despite your expectation of what it will be like, right? You're kind of like, and the more resistance, the more blocks come in the way, the bigger the impact is when you finally take that risk and it goes well. It just speaks to the level of programming and trauma that's there. So the healing is just that much more powerful when they can overcome the fear of taking that risk.
Yeah.
So corrective experiences, that's the magic. That's what shifts the dance more so than anything. So the psychoed is, if anything, the cherry on top, but you have to have the meat before you can put the cherry on top.
Right. It's a difficult part. Okay, play a little bit more. Should I play a bit more up here?
Sure, yeah. And I'm gonna listen now for how does it land, right? Because if, you know, that's the most important thing. If it moves him towards experience, that's okay, right? And at a certain point, psychoed can do that, and then it drops off because you're just targeting a different part of the brain, that the prefrontal, not the amygdala, right? And you want to sit with the amygdala as much as you can.
Yeah, so bear with me, because I think I continue there for a little bit, and then comes the male partner.
If you think about that situation again from yesterday, and all the things that you couldn't say in that given moment, well, maybe things or feelings even that came to you afterwards, what would you want Ellie to know about that situation from yesterday? Things that she never got to hear, or maybe emotions that she never got to experience because other emotions, maybe those, you know, the ones that are masking the real emotions, came to the surface. So all she got was that unhelpful emotion parade, and then no verbal communication, right? What would you like her to know about that interaction yesterday?
That I'm scared that this is going to be who I am, and that I won't be able to be the person that she needs me to be.
So pause. I'll tell you, I know exactly what you're trying to do, I feel. And it came across as like, you know, some questions and then psychoed and like kind of double, triple barreled kind of thing. And so it's just a little, you don't know where he's going to go with it because the focus isn't there. Like what you're really wanting isn't there because you presented a few different options and he took it. And what you ended up getting is from his response, that's what I was waiting to hear, is like you're kind of asking him, what would you, first of all, you know, you started with, what do you think about yesterday? So we're talking about his head and we're talking about like his interpretation, and we're talking about not now, right? We're talking about another time. And EFT is always, when we get to doing any kind of enactments, it's always about what's happening right now. So if there's no emotion in the room, you're going to get something conceptual, right? And what you got is insecurity, right? You got like, I'm a failure, basically, right? So the answer to your question is, I want her to know I'm a failure and I can't make her happy, right? And there's so much underneath it as far as experience. So when you want to get someone to enact something, you want them to enact the experience, not what they're, not the in this case the insecurity that they have, right? Because where can she take, what about that can she really connect to? It's not going to be anything that she hasn't heard before. She's heard as insecurity, right? But what from that can she connect with? The experience you want is live, primary, raw emotion, right? Stored up emotion. And if you're going to ask a what do you think question, you're not going to get that, right? Whereas if you help him deepen what is happening for him right now, and that can come to the surface, and then you go and you can feel it, and then you go, you know, what would that be like to turn to her and to share that with her, right? That's new experience. That's not something he's comfortable to do, right? He is comfortable to do what he did, which is what you asked him to do, which is to talk about his insecurities. And of course, all she's going to hear from that is like excuse of why he's not wanting to be there for her. Right? And you know, it just is already what they have. So I would, but you started like at the very, very beginning of this, you started well, because you said, what is that like for you? You're starting with like the very, very beginning of this, you said, what is this like for you? That's going to bring him into the here and the now, right? It's what's happening for you right now. That's really good. Once you get to feel what he's going through, you go, what would that be like right now, to share that with her? If it's doable, then you get him to do it. If it's too much, you get him to share the fear.
And then again, I kind of went like away from that moment. I kind of distanced again.
You mentioned filling the gap. So try, if you do watch it back, like what was going on for you when you like, were you aware that, oh, this would be a really good moment to enact? And what came up for you? Were you afraid to do it? Like what was coming up for you? Were you trying to protect him? You know, if he was to do it and she would not respond well, like think of what did you just not see that it was a good moment to enact? Like think about it.
I honestly think that I didn't see it. I just didn't have the instinct for it in that given moment. And that's the easiest. I like I'm really aware about that. Like now I really focus on all these like moments throughout the session, because I realize how difficult for me it is to spot them, where I can really grab the focus and bring them deeper. So that's a big challenge. But that's I think that's it. I don't think I was thinking of protecting him. I'm actually really determined to expose him emotionally as much as I can. So it's just me like not really seeing these moments clearly for now.
So given that, what I want you to try to focus on in the next little while is just do the smallest enactment possible.
Okay.
right? The smallest enactment is, you can think about it as, if I spend even a few minutes, even 2 or 3 minutes with him, where did we get to from where we started? And if by the end of the 3 minutes, there's something that resembles an experience of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
where he's experiencing something, right? Because generally you start at the top, you start at some kind of trigger, right? Some kind of belief. And then after a few minutes, you get into like, this is what it's like for me.
Yeah.
And if you get anything resembling that, have him share it, or have her share it, or ask her what it would be like for them to share it, right?
Okay.
Don't overthink about how deep you are with them. Anything that, if you were to ask them and they say, yeah, that would be really hard, means that you're on the right track. You're moving away from how they're already sharing,
Yeah.
and then to sharing it this way would not be easy. That means you're moving them away from how they already share.
Yeah.
So just to make it even more concrete, some very initial, easier, let's stop sharing just so we can see each other's full screen here.
Yeah.
Some easy kind of baby steps that some people don't recognize can be shared are something as simple as owning your own behavior, right? So we call it action tendency. So for example, for him, it might be, so, you're at your end of your 3 minutes, and let's say you're really only at, when I hear some kind of criticism in your tone or in your voice, I think to myself that I'm no good, and so all I know how to do is shut down. It's too much, and I shut down. That's an experience, right? And what you see is, me turning away or walking away or something like that. Okay, so that could be turned into a shared into an enactment, right? It's sharing all of that, right? When, especially if you have a particular moment, like in the past, like yesterday, hey, when you said that thing to me, I took that to mean, and you can turn that into a full script, right? I took that to mean that you're upset at me, and when I think you're upset at me, I shut down and I walk away, or I just sit there and I don't respond to you, right? And then all that does is it makes you angrier, and then I shut down even more. You're enacting their understanding of the model, but what might be different than what they normally do is, he's not shutting down, he's describing shutting down, which is actually the opposite of shutting down, which means next time it happens, he might have the confidence, because if he does it in session and she responds quite well to it, to say, hey, I'm experiencing a lot right now. I'm feeling like I'm going to shut down.
Yeah.
And then she goes, oh, okay, hold on. Right. We talked about this in session. Let me put on the brakes and not pursue so much, which is my hoping is to pursue. So I'll give him some space and I'll ask him like, what's coming up for you or something like that. But if he can see that describing his shutdown experience or action tendency to shut down actually doesn't make her pursue more, because actually shutting down does that for her. But expressing how his body wants to shut down is antithesis to shutting down, which actually can bring her in and give her the indication of what's actually happening for him, which is actually very different than her perception that he doesn't care. Right? As obvious as it is to us, just kind of them being able to spell it out and be able to look at their partner and share it, that's a very good first step enactment, right? And not so scary, because all they're really doing is owning up to what their body wants to do. When the other person does X, my body wants to do this, right? For her, when he is pulling away or shutting down, my body wants to rev up, right? And I come at you with questions and statements and this kind of thing. No different. They're both owning their action tendency, right? Which is much better than what they're currently doing, which is just acting from that place. So that could be a good first a first level sort of enactment.
Yeah, thank you. No, this is really good for Thursday. I will be
Yeah.
thinking about that. And thank you so much for all the feedback, because I
No
already took
problem.
so many notes just with like even your direct quotes, which I find so like helpful, and they just land for me a lot. Like they make it so easy for me. I actually have to run because I have a client soon. But I really want to thank you, Ofir, for your time
No
again.
problem.
I will
Yeah,
keep
if any,
recording. So like if something
perfect.
new comes up, then yeah, probably
Yeah.
turn to you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a few minutes too for anyone that wants to stay if they have any questions, just around Kaja's case here, and then we can send out the recording after for everyone as well.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for
Bye,
listening.
Kaja. Yeah,
Thanks.
we'll
Bye.
see you on Friday. Take
See
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. So Anne or Sila or anyone else, any questions, Pansy, around what we covered, or pretty clear?
I think you had mentioned once in one of your recordings that you usually try to start with the withdrawer, but not always. Is that a good recommendation?
So EFT recommends in stage 2 to start with the withdrawer. For stage 1, there isn't a clear guideline. The more escalated a case is, sometimes I'll start with a withdrawer, but not necessarily. But the reason is that I've said that before is, first of all, I'm in my relationships a withdrawer, so it's easier to connect to the withdrawer. So that's one reason. And so whoever you might have more affinity for, that's an easier start to get to a primary place with someone because of how easy you can just kind of see things from their own worldview. That said, it's not a hard and fast rule, because if we're working with a withdrawer and you continually see the pursuer getting escalated, you can't just continually stay with the withdrawer. You might need to start with a pursuer, right? Generally speaking, in those cases, those are pursuers that have been or feeling like they've been doing all the emotional work, and they're the ones that feel like they've been the only ones to be hurting, right? Which is sometimes an argument to start with the withdrawer and have them do some emotional work. But if that's too triggering, then I'll start with the pursuer, right? So yeah, it's not a hard and fast rule. I'll go either way. Sometimes it's just whoever seems like they're, because in the first 30-minute session, who feels like they're more attuned to their own emotions, to their own primary emotion, right? Not, not non-primary emotions, right? Yeah, but I don't know if that helps. There's no clear cut for something like that.
It does help. Yeah, it does help. Do you ever do enactments when you're doing individual? When you see them individually the first time?
No, because when I'm working with individuals, and not I'm not going to be seeing them as a couple, then yes. But in that individual session, it's really just information gathering to support the couple, which is the client, right? The client is the couple. So one, there's very little time because I'm only seeing them for 25 minutes. My goal in the individual session, at least one of the goals, is just to create an attachment relationship where they feel like I'm really understanding their individual part of the dynamic, right? And how that's leading to what they consider are the issues in the relationship, and to capture their goals for the work. Those are the main 3 goals, I would say. And in 25 minutes, you sometimes don't even get through all the questions. And I'll usually start with, when I'm doing the questionnaire, stating that, questions I have are going to be the same questions I go through with your partner, but don't feel like we're creating a formal questionnaire where you have to answer kind of one by one. If you just want to talk for 25 minutes about your relationship, that's great. I'll just extract whatever I need from that. I might focus them if it's kind of all over the place. But the other part is, if I'm asking anything and it doesn't seem relevant to your issue, you can skip. or if there's anything you want to add a lot of information to in one of the questions, feel free to, to expand on anything, because again, the whole purpose of it is to build that attachment. In the future, I'm going to be asking them to take some pretty big risks. So right away, having them feel like I'm really capturing their, not just their issue, like their struggle, their what they see as the issue in the relationship, right? Just to feel really heard, essentially, is the purpose of that session. And that's going to begin, basic rapport building and just trying to really understand what it is that they're sharing is the purpose of that individual session. So yeah, no, we're not doing enactments in that first session.
The questionnaire provides a good kind of framework and map, and
Yeah.
and sometimes I find that they give you a lot of information that kind of answers some of the questions anyway, and so
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, you don't
Exactly.
really have
Yeah,
to.
and sometimes I don't get to see them individually, and I end up picking up on those things indirectly over time, right? So it's nice to have it, and it does make the work smoother, but I don't push people to do that if they don't want to, right? But the majority of people, it makes sense to them to meet individually before coming in together, if nothing other than, because I get this a lot on the first phone call. Oh, my husband's never done therapy, and can we like just take it really slow for the first session? Perfect. They get an individual session, and they get a lighter couple session at only being 30 minutes, right? So it's a lot more manageable in the 30 minutes. Like how sticking out our neck are we doing in only 30 minutes, right? And then that gives them a sense of, okay, well, this is what 30 minutes was like. Next time, do we want to do 50 based on those 30, or do we want to do 80? And depending on how that first session went, then that's a good experiential. I'm like, well, listen to your body. How do you feel? If you don't know now, you can book 50 or 80 and change it later. That's totally fine.
Well, I'll save the rest of my questions for tomorrow.
Sounds good. Yeah, and for anyone else that wants to join, tomorrow at 3 o'clock. You're muted, Pansy.
Sorry, I thought it was going to be on Friday.
Oh, yes, sorry. It's Wednesday today. That's right. Friday at 3 o'clock. Correct.
Yeah, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, I have a couple at 3. I've got a 25:30 at 3 o'clock tomorrow. So cool. So we'll see some of you there. Otherwise, yeah, I'll upload the video in the next little while, and you'll be able to see it there as well.
Thank you, Ofir.
Thank you so.
See you on Friday.
Thank you.
No problem. Take care. Bye-bye.
Much.
Good to hear.
Bye.